Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. As all of you know, we are now on Telegram as well. I hope most of you have already joined the Telegram channel of Byjus Exam Prep IAS. If not, please do scan this code or you can also use the link given in the description of the video. As a part of this Telegram channel, you will get all the latest updates about the current affairs and other sessions taken by the teachers at Byjus. Let's begin with the first article that is written by a former IGP, Inspector General of Police of the CRPF. The point that he's making in this article is that UPSPA, that is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, has outlived its date. He says that it is now time to withdraw this act from the entire northeastern part of India. And he says that the government has actually promised the same in the past, but just that they have never fulfilled that promise. For example, this year itself in April, the Prime Minister of the country actually said that the Government of India plans to withdraw the UPSPA Act of 1958 completely from the northeast part of the country. Not just him, the Defence Minister also, Mr. Rajnath Singh, had said in April that all the armed forces are actually in favour of withdrawing the UPSPA Act. However, the circumstances right now are not really adequate for that. Now, as you know, UPSPA is considered as a very unfair law, especially by the people who are living in those areas which are under UPSPA. In simple terms, it gives a lot of power to the people working in the armed forces. They can search any premises if they think that the premise actually has something which concerns the security of India. Also, if they suspect a certain person of carrying out a crime, they actually have the power to even shoot at that person. And any inquiry under this particular act will only take place after prior permission of the central government. All of this gives a lot of power to the armed forces. Now, the fact is that on one hand, the armed forces actually do need such special kinds of powers, considering the dangerous areas and places where they actually work. Be it Jammu and Kashmir, be it the northeast part of India, especially in those areas where insurgency is very high. But on the other hand, you cannot ignore the fact that this law has also led to violation of human rights of many people. For example, in 2012, there was a case filed in the Supreme Court by Extrajudicial Execution Victim Families Association, in which they claimed that 1,528 people have been killed in fake encounters and the people in the armed forces have not been given any punishment because they are protected under UPSPA. In fact, Supreme Court had even made a committee after this petition was filed to look into these cases, but somehow the government, irrespective of whichever party is in power, has not really favored withdrawing UPSPA completely. Now, the other side of the story is that UPSPA has been withdrawn from many areas, so the situation is improving. If you compare the areas that were under UPSPA 20-30 years back as compared to what is the situation now, there's a vast improvement. But the fact is that there are still many areas that remain under UPSPA where the armed forces have been given a lot of powers. The people who oppose this law say that this is a British era law, introduced specially by the British to actually control the working of the Indian freedom fighters. It was specially introduced during the Quit India movement in the form of an ordinance actually in 1942, especially in parts of Bengal and Assam where the number of freedom fighters were very high. Later on, when India became independent, the first security threat that India faced apart from Jammu and Kashmir was actually in the Naga areas. Because of the Naga insurgents that were demanding freedom from India, and because they were extremely violent against the Indian armed forces, the government of India had no other option but to continue the UPSPA law and give these powers to the armed forces to fight against these insurgents. And since then, some part of the northeast India has always remained under the UPSPA law. Now, in the 1970s, when the Shillong Peace Agreement was signed with the Naga insurgents, it was hoped that now in the coming years there would not be any need of UPSPA. But the problem with Naga insurgency is very simple. That is, it is not just one single group that is taking part in these kind of insurgency operations. There are actually a lot of different groups, and added to that, the other problem is that many groups actually keep on splintering. So you would see new groups just keep coming up after a few years. So even if the government of India signs a peace agreement with one of the groups, it is no guarantee that a new group will not come up. For example, from the old group, the people that are not happy with the government agreement will now break up and make a new group, and they will start undertaking violent activities. And that has been a big problem, because of which the Naga peace accord also has not led to the withdrawal of UPSPA. As you know, the Naga movement is now led by NSCN, that is Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland, and it has two parts: NSCN-K, that is led by Khaplang, and NSCN-IM. IM is a group that has signed a peace accord with the government, while the Khaplang group still remains at large, working against the government of India. Now, all of us accept the fact that yes, the armed forces do require special powers in order to undertake the challenges that they are facing in these parts of the country. There would be no one who would say that no such challenges don't exist. But the question is about how much powers are enough. And would there be any question asked to the people of the armed forces? You can take a simple example of what happened in Nagaland just a few months back. You would have seen in the Mon district of Nagaland, a number of civilians were actually killed. So far, no action has been taken against anyone in the armed forces for that operation as well. These are the kind of things that actually anger the local population and thus increase the demand of withdrawing of UPSPA. As per the UPSPA law, any officer not below the rank of captain in the military forces is empowered to use force as necessary, which may even cause death against any person. This was the original context of the law that was introduced by the British. Then the 1958 Act passed after the Indian independence empowered even non-commissioned officers who are working at non-commissioned position in the armed forces. Even they are now allowed to fire that may cause any death, and no prosecution will take place without the permission given by the central government. Now, the fact remains that almost everyone living in these areas, which are under the UPSPA law, oppose this law, but still no government has taken the decision to withdraw it completely. You would have seen there are multiple petitions filed against it. There are multiple people who have raised their voices. For example, the most famous one being the case of Chanu Sharmila, the Iron Lady of Manipur, who was on a fast for many, many years. Her photos in which there is a pipe that is attached to her nostril is famous because she has to be fed through that. She did not eat from her mouth for many, many years, demanding that northeast part of India should be free of UPSPA, especially Manipur. The government of India and the Supreme Court have come together to form various committees time and time again to discuss how UPSPA can be repealed. But so far, none of the recommendations that talk about repeal of UPSPA have been considered by the government of India. This year, however, has been different. As we discussed, not just the Prime Minister, even the Defense Minister has said that the government does plan to remove UPSPA from as much area of the northeast as possible, and even the forces are in favor of it. But it is due to the situation that UPSPA still continues, and hopefully in the future that will also improve. Now, this, as you see in the map, is the present status of UPSPA. From most parts of Assam, as you can see, UPSPA has been lifted already. Then the darker blue areas like these ones are the ones where UPSPA is still in force. Then these orangish parts that you actually see here, from here UPSPA has been partially lifted. So partially lifted from those police areas where peace has returned now. But as you can see, there are some parts of the northeast where UPSPA still remains. Apart from this, UPSPA still remains in Jammu and Kashmir, but the debate mainly is about withdrawal of UPSPA from the northeast part of India that has largely remained peaceful for most part of the last 3 or 4 decades. Also, interestingly, we don't really talk about the state government's role in UPSPA. We only talk about the center government's role in approval, in withdrawal, in giving permission for the prosecution of the armed forces. But the state government also actually has a slight role to play. Here. Let's see what. So the state government will be informally consulted whenever the central government is taking a decision to impose UPSPA in any area. The central government takes decisions after having received a recommendation from the state government. Also, since the police works under the state government, obviously the coordination with the police also has to take place. The Act gives power to security forces to open fire, but it cannot be done without a prior warning given to the suspect. If the suspect intends to surrender, then the firing will not happen. As per the Act, if the suspects have been arrested, Then within 24 hours, the security forces will hand them over to the local police station, which comes under state government. So it is the state governments also that do have a slight role to play in UPSPA. As I said earlier, one of the reasons why people in the northeast part of India, where UPSPA is still in force, do not have trust in this law is because no action is taken against those officers who are responsible for illegal deaths of civilians. We saw what happened in Nagaland. Even the army accepted that this was actually a false operation. But even then, the army men that were actually involved here, for them, Government of India has not given the permission to go ahead with their prosecution. Amongst the various committees that have been made by the Supreme Court on the question of UPSPA, the most significant one is the Santosh Hegde Committee of 2013. As I said, this committee was made by Supreme Court after a PIL was filed in the court about illegal fake encounters of over 1500 people in Manipur under the UPSPA law. This committee said that 5 of the 6 encounters that they actually looked into were not genuine and there was disproportionate force that was actually used. The committee also said that UPSPA has given sweeping powers to men in uniform and they are not using it to protect the citizens themselves. The committee was of the view that if greater power was given, then it also requires greater restraint. But as you know, UPSPA still remains very much in force in many parts of the Northeast despite the reports given by such committees. The next article that we have here is about the individual's right to privacy in India. It takes us back to the famous Puttaswamy judgment, a judgment that has now completed 5 years. Just a reminder, in 2017, the Supreme Court of India, in the famous KS Puttaswamy case, said that right to privacy is a part of fundamental right under Article 21. However, just like other fundamental rights, this is not an absolute right at all. However, as per the author, the Government of India, case by case, year by year, has been neglecting this fundamental right to privacy. All the talk about having the personal data protection bill have come down to nothing. As you know, the Government of India has withdrawn this bill from the Parliament without any information about when the bill will be introduced again. The author says that this is a well-known information that getting someone's data such as phone number, name is not really difficult in India. In fact, you can openly see ads on social media that we can get you phone numbers of 1000 people, 10,000 people at very, very cheap cost. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's assume you open up a restaurant business. And the restaurant business that you're opening up, you are specially selling fast food. So most probably the audience that you're catering to would be young people. There are many companies that can actually give you thousands and lakhs of phone numbers of people who are all in the age group of 20 to 35 years so that you can send them messages specially about your restaurant, give them offers so that they can actually come and they can buy food. Or these companies can also sell you phone numbers of those people living in a certain area where you're opening up your restaurant so that you can actually market and advertise your restaurant to them. All these phone numbers being given to you, this is all illegal because those people did not ask for their phone numbers to be shared. But this is such a common practice that goes straight against the Supreme Court's order on the right to privacy. Have you ever wondered how you get so many calls for credit card, loans, etc. when you have not even given your number anywhere for that? All of that, as per the author, goes straight against the Supreme Court's order of right to privacy. And on the other hand, the government, rather than protecting the right to privacy, is actually going after the right to privacy of the people. He talks about the Pegasus software that was in the news, a software the Government of India had bought from Israel, specially to spy on certain people. Israel also made it very, very clear that this software is only sold to governments. So there is no chance that someone apart from the Government of India would have taken this software. It was a government transaction. So on one hand, we don't even have the right to privacy being followed in India. On the other hand, we have the government itself trying to snoop on people by buying such softwares. However, the reason why this article has been written is not just because 5 years have now been completed after the right to privacy judgment. It is specially written because of what government did a few weeks back with respect to VPN servers. Now, those who don't know what is a VPN server are those softwares that allow you to access certain websites without disclosing your identity. or without disclosing your own IP address. These servers also allow you to access some of those websites which are actually not available in India. Now, these servers and services have been in use for a very, very long time. But the reason why it is in the news is now Government of India has given an order that if anyone uses a VPN server, the VPN companies will also have to verify their customers, keep the KYC records, and share it with the government as well. Meaning that even the right to privacy of people who were using VPNs earlier has now been violated. That is the reason why this article has been written. And as a result of this, many VPN companies have already announced that they will be moving out of India. This is a very simple diagram to show you how a VPN works. Usually right now, if you open up a website, let's say Facebook or Twitter, that website gets to know the IP address. IP address is kind of an identity of your connection. So any website can get to know from where is this person who's actually trying to open up our website. But when VPN server is involved, the website doesn't get to know who you are. They will only get to know location of the VPN server only. This is how VPN server comes in picture. Now, this allows the user to be anonymous. This allows a user's data to not be shared. This also gives security by actually encrypting the traffic. So it is used by many people, especially those who are trying to access data, which is very, very important. But now with the government's order, even the VPN server companies will have to ask for KYC from all their users. VPN, as you would know, stands for Virtual Private Network. In fact, a question on VPN server was asked in the prelims a few years back. They mainly encrypt the internet traffic signals and they don't disclose the identity of the user. By hiding the IP address will not be shown even to the internet service provider or any third party. So it gives you encryption options. It even allows you to access regional content. So for example, you might know that Netflix in US and Netflix in India have different types of shows. Some of them are common, but some of the shows are only available on Netflix US and not Netflix in India. So now if you're in India, you use a VPN server that actually encrypts your data, you might be able to access even those shows that are present in Netflix US version. So you can get access to regional content as well. However, there are some limitations as well. The internet speed gets reduced because there is one more place where your data has to be rerouted through. Secondly, antivirus softwares mostly will not protect you. So that is also a big concern. That is why many countries, especially those who have very tough governments, have actually banned VPN servers. Like China, Belarus, Iraq, North Korea, Russia, the countries that you would expect usually do not allow VPNs or highly regulate VPNs. As you know, India or any other democratic country would not really want to join these list of nations, but this is what is happening in case of India. These are the new government rules that we were talking about. Now, these VPN companies will have to keep a record of every personal user's information like name, email ID, phone number, etc. for 5 years. And if the government asks for the data, they will have to share it with the government. Also, if there is any cyber security incident that actually happens, within 6 hours, these VPN companies will have to report it to CERT-In, which is a government agency looking into these kind of issues. The government of India is saying that we are doing this to ensure that no one is able to use internet against the interest of the nation. As a result of which, multiple VPN companies have announced that they are now moving out of India, especially the ones that have their physical servers in India. They are moving out and replacing these servers. They'll be going ahead in some other nations which allow them much more freedom. The next article that we have here is about one of the biggest issues that have remained unresolved in India. That is the issue of manual scavenging. The reason why this article has been written is because the Tamil Nadu government has finally notified the rules of prohibition of employment as manual scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act of 2013. As you know, after any law is passed by the parliament, the government respectively has to notify the rules about it. For example, under this law, the government would have to notify how the rehabilitation will happen, the process behind it. That is called subordinate legislation, where the policies under the laws are made by the government, they are made by the executive. Now, the sad part is that manual scavenging has been banned in India for many years. As you know, the practice of manual scavenging is manually cleaning waste such as a human excreta, the gutters, etc., the sewers that we have. The law says that while manual scavenging is completely prohibited, it may be allowed under very specific circumstances. For example, those circumstances where mechanical equipment cannot be deployed or human intervention is absolutely necessary. But even for that to happen, a lot of protection has to be given, which is not given in real life, like air purifier, gas mask, device for artificial respiration, mask, breathing apparatus. All of these have to be given, but this is just on paper. The sad reality is that even today, we have so many people who are dying because they are being forced to work as manual scavengers. Although all of this has been banned, but still, you see, even in bigger cities in India, people being asked to go inside the sewers to clean them up without any protective equipment given to them. All these sewers are filled with extremely poisonous gases, and it is almost impossible for anyone to survive if they go and do this work day in and day out. In fact, the government numbers themselves say that since 1993, when the practice was first banned, 971 people have lost their lives. As you know, most of these government numbers are much lower than reality. For a country like India that adheres to the human rights record, and for a country that actually values human life so much, even one death by this method is too much. And having close to 1,000 people losing their life because of this is actually something extremely shameful. All these are the laws that the government has passed in the past, especially to get rid of the practice of manual scavenging. There is a Supreme Court judgment also. The government of India has even initiated something called the Swachhata Abhiyan app, Safai Mitra Suraksha Challenge, so on and so forth. There are multiple laws that have been passed because this question of manual scavengers is also a caste based question. The sad reality is that not every Dalit works as a manual scavenger, but every manual scavenger is a Dalit. Now, that also has implications on the society. That means that as a society, we have still not understood the fact that work is not related to caste. Although these practices have been banned on paper through all these laws, but in reality, still a lot of people are being forced to work as manual scavengers. It also has to do with the mindset of the society. As I discussed, a lot of people still believe that this kind of a work is to be done by specific people only, and only they should be forced to do this, especially in the rural areas. You do see announcements by many state governments bringing machines and robots that will be able to clean the sewers, but even then, we do have a lot of people undertaking this work manually because machine cannot reach everywhere. But the fact is, the least that we can do is allow them to have all the protective equipment before they undertake such kind of activities, because this is meant for the entire society. The next article that we have here is a report that says that if India does achieve the net zero target by 2070, as we had hoped, it could also boost India's GDP and bring a lot of new jobs. The article says that if we achieve it by 2070, the target that the Prime Minister has set, it could boost India's economy by 4.7% above the baseline growth in the GDP by 2036. Also, it could add 1.5 crore new jobs by 2047. The money that we will end up saving by not being dependent on fossil fuels could also be used to actually transition into new forms of energy and bring even more jobs. Also, if India can achieve a target even sooner, if India manages to achieve the net zero target by 2050, then the boost in the GDP will be even higher. That is 7.3%, and 2 crore new jobs may be created. Now, I would like to remind you that these are just projections, that if this does happen by 2050, 2070, then we'll have these many jobs and these many numbers. It is obviously a very heartening thing to hear, but all of that needs a lot of investment and a lot of new policies to actually be achieved. As you know, the Prime Minister in the Glasgow summit had announced that India will be trying to achieve the net zero target by 2070. Net zero means a situation where all the emissions in the country will be balanced by taking up an equivalent amount of greenhouse gases from the air. So a net emission will be zero. Many countries have given their targets. European Union will achieve it very soon. China has also given their target. India was not forced by anyone, but we still announced that we will be planning to go carbon neutral by 2070. China's pledge is to achieve it by 2060. USA has a pledge of 2050. Europe wants to achieve it even sooner. However, do remember, just taking this pledge will not be enough. We have to work towards it incrementally. That would require a lot of investment in clean energy, a lot of investment to go away from the fossil fuel. Even if all these targets are met, we might not be able to curtail the rise in temperature of the earth to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, but it will still be much, much better as compared to other situations. Now, it's not just India, US, or China. Many countries have actually taken this pledge of achieving net zero. However, any country knows that this is more about publicity at this point of time. So everyone wants to actually make headlines and say we will achieve net zero. But if you see, very few countries have actually passed laws about it. Most of the countries have actually just taken a pledge, means just announcing that we will try to do that. Then there are those countries which have actually made policies about it, but even these policies are not binding. So, in short, there are very few countries that have actually passed laws to achieve that, while the others are just doing lip service. The reason why you don't see India's name here is because this data is from October 2021. If India has to be included, India will come somewhere here in the third category because we have not passed any law. There is no policy document regarding that. It was just a pledge taken by the Prime Minister at the Glasgow summit. The next article that we have here is about the new Chief Justice of India, Justice U. Lalit. As you know, whenever a new Chief Justice of India is appointed, it's a tradition that they usually announce what will be their priority, what changes would they try and bring to the Supreme Court. So he has announced that my priority will be to hear as many pending cases as possible, number one. Second, to ensure that at least one constitution bench functions throughout the year so that the constitutional cases are not delayed. And thirdly, he says that the urgent cases will be heard on priority. Now, you might not be aware that right now, the problem is that even to get your case listed in the Supreme Court is a very, very hard process. If you are the government, if you are someone who is very powerful, very influential, then it's a different matter altogether. But for the common people to even get your case listed in the Supreme Court, it's a very tedious process. These are the things that the Supreme Court Chief Justice will now have to work on. He says that the lawyers will be allowed to mention whether their matters are urgent or not, including bail petitions, and they will be heard first rather than on a first come first serve basis. He also says that the process of getting your case listed through Supreme Court registry is very, very tedious. We'll have to change that as well. We will try and make sure that the Supreme Court becomes more citizen friendly. Right now, you have 71,000 cases pending in the Supreme Court. I have told this to you earlier also, I'll repeat this again. If you want to see how many cases are pending in any court in India, it's a very simple method. You just have to go online on Google and search for something called National Judicial Data Grid, NJDG. The sad part is that the website today is not working. In fact, I wanted to take a screenshot. So, just like many other government websites, it is also under maintenance. But when it starts to work, you can actually see how many cases are pending at present. Now, constitutional bench, many of you would already know. If you don't know this, constitutional bench means a bench that will hear cases regarding interpretation of the constitution. Such a bench should have at least 5 judges or more than 5 judges. That is called a constitutional bench. Although there have been some exceptions where a few cases regarding constitutional interpretations were heard by smaller benches as well. But Article 145 mandates that the constitutional bench would have at least 5 judges, if not more. Now, in India, you are very much aware of the fact that we have a lot of pending cases, there are a lot of issues related to the judiciary. The one other big issue, however, is the number of judges that we have and the vacancy at the judges level. As you can see, if you look at the high courts in India and the lower courts, there are a huge number of vacant seats. In Allahabad High Court, for example, almost half the seats are actually vacant. Same with Karnataka. If you look at the judges ratio to population in the country, India has one of the lowest numbers. Only 18 judges per million population as compared to over 100 in US, 147 in China. So there is no surprise that the number of cases which are pending in India are at a very, very high level because we just don't have enough judges. So if you get a question on the issues in the Supreme Court or the judiciary, don't forget to mention this point as well. These were the important articles from the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number one. Despite a series of laws prohibiting the practice of manual scavenging in India, it still remains a huge problem. Comment. Second, achieving the net zero target would be a boon for the economy as well and not just the environment. Comment. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. As you know, the Byjus exam prep app portal is a place where you can actually write answers to these questions. You can see each other's answer and give a feedback on them and learn from each other. The link for this portal is given in the description of the video. Do click on the link. Try to write as many answers as possible, submit the answers there, and allow each other to check that, give feedback so that you can learn from each other's mistake. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good weekend ahead.